economy. And then, of course, everything changes. You know, it's one thing when you are number one, it's another thing when you're number two. And the strange thing about the United States is that it's the world's freest country with the world's freest press, and you can say anything you want. But if you're an American politician and you say a simple fact, which most people will not dispute, that the United States could become the number two economy in the world, you're finished. You're toast. You can never speak in the land of free speech about America becoming the number two country, which I think is unwise, because as a friend of America, I think it's good for America to start thinking strategically how it preserves its global influence even after it becomes the number two economy in the world.
When you say these things, you get a big pushback, don't you? In America,
well, the strange thing is that, I tend to speak to the more thoughtful Americans. I'll give you an example, okay? The former Treasury Secretary, the former president of Harvard University, Professor Larry Summers, was asked in a Bloomberg news program, so it's on live TV, which were the three best books he read in 2020. So he said, number one, Barack Obama's memoirs. Number two, a book by the Nobel laureate Angus Deaton. Number three, he said, Has China Won by Kishore Mahbubani. So people like Larry Summers, when you give them the arguments, they're persuaded by the reasoning. So there is still a thoughtful class of American intellectuals who are still good students of the Western Enlightenment and can see the logic of reasoning, can see the scientific evidence, and can accept it. But the problem in the United States of America today is that experts are no longer trusted. And so as a result of that, 20 years ago, when you said you were from Harvard, people would say, wow, you're from Harvard. Now you go to the United States of America and you say you're from Harvard, they say, you're not one of us. So that's the danger in the United States. So I think there's as you know, especially after the rise of Donald Trump, there's a very strong anti-intellectual tradition developing in the United States of America, which I think is bad for the United States of America, because the United States has always had the best universities, the best newspapers, the best think tanks, and now the best anti-intellectual culture, which is the paradox.
Well, I noticed these days this Professor Mearsheimer, if I pronounce his name correctly, who has a contrary view on the war in Ukraine. He faces a lot of attack, which is uncharacteristic in the American intelligence here.
You're absolutely right. And I think what's happened to John Mearsheimer is a perfect example of what I call this anti-intellectual trend in the United States of America, because if you say things that are politically unpopular, in the past, Americans would celebrate dissenting opinions. Now the pressure on people like John Mearsheimer is absolutely phenomenal, even though what he's saying is absolutely correct. That as NATO carried on its expansion, and if NATO had admitted Ukraine, it would have been clearly like planting a dagger close into the heart of Russia, right? That's obvious. And so just to state that fact, which is true, he gets absolutely attacked and no one listens to him, sadly, because at the end of the day, I think it'd be wiser for the United States and the West to acknowledge that Russia has got legitimate security concerns, security interests. All great powers do, right? And this is shown by the fact that a small country called Solomon Islands, which is so far away from the United States of America, when it decides to sign a defense agreement with China, United States objects. See? So,
United States objects, and the Australians, I think, have gone nuts over this.
absolutely. And so, on the one hand, the Australians are the one who are among the most vociferous critics of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which of course cannot be justified. But at the same time, when the Australians say that Russians have no reason to worry about NATO going to Ukraine, why are the Australians worried about Chinese coming to Solomon Islands? There is obviously Professor Jeff Sachs, by the way, at Columbia University, has pointed out the contradiction between what the United States and Australia say in Ukraine and what they say on Solomon Islands. I was a student of philosophy, right? And there's a very simple rule in philosophy. If you say that no great power should have a sphere of influence, right? And that's the argument. Then you're right, logically, Russia should not have a sphere of influence. Similarly, America shouldn't have a sphere of influence, right? It's logic, it's just pure, simple logic. So, if you say that America should have a sphere of influence, you're saying great power should have a sphere of influence and Russia should have a sphere of influence. This is all simple Greek logic taught to us 2,400 years ago by the Greeks. And